area, which is mired in politics and difficult but complex issues, and tell us how they solve those issues. And we thought it would be far better to bring two local heroes that are here in town that are sought after as national speakers, but have some context for the conversation and the issues we're facing here today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to both Ryan and Nathaniel. After we finish with this session, we're going to continue the conversation across the way from Sean Hall for our reception that's sponsored by Ed Castro Landscaping. So that'll be at 5 o'clock. Until then, we have their presentations and then hopefully a robust Q&A.
So you may actually need something to drink after our conversation. I'm not sure. So that may be good, Michael, that we actually have libations, I guess you could say, after our conversation. You know, before we get started, there are two things that I wanted to say. One, I wanted to say, and I know Ryan would believe the same thing and support this, that we really appreciate Michael and Park Pride. And let's give them a round of applause. Park Pride is a great organization with a great leader. And sometimes they don't sometimes end up in the same space, right? Sometimes you can have a great organization and not so great leader, and you can have a great leader and not so great organization. So it's great to have both in Park Pride. And I also want to honor Michael too for his commitment and courage around the equity question as it relates to parks. I had a chance to participate in some of the sessions, and I'll tell you, I mean, you know, the diversity of the group of participants of this conference, as well as the diversity of the panels and the willingness to have real, honest conversations about equity. You know, I just want to commend you, Michael, for being such a great friend, and not only a personal friend, but a co-conspirator, so to speak, in moving the equity agenda forward in Metro Atlanta. And last but certainly not least, you know, when Ryan and I, and just for the record, we are really friends. You know, this is not a made-up thing. Began to have a conversation about this opportunity because we've never had an opportunity to talk before together to a group. We didn't want to develop a canned, you know, presentation. I mean, this is our home. Many people in the audience we love and care about and have supported us over the years. And so really for us, this is really like a family conversation. And we really wanted to make it informal. And so that is what you will experience during our time together.
Yeah. Welcome. No, I reiterate everything that Nathaniel said. There's no need to say it again, but just say thank you to Park Pride and to Michael, particularly about wanting to have this conversation and year after year continuing to develop this conversation. It's important. It's an important conversation, and also Atlanta is ready for it, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
So we'll jump in, and you know, unfortunately, we are approaching quickly the anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. On April 4th, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. He was assassinated for being an apostle, a prophet of love and inclusion in a time where the dream that he provided the world was revolutionary in many, many ways. And one of the key things that he elevated was this idea of what he called a beloved community. A community where everyone mattered. A community where everyone had an opportunity to not only prosper, but participate in decision making, and that everyone was looked at as an asset. And no one was looked at as a liability. And for Ryan and I, we felt like that is a great, great frame. The beloved community, for our conversations about parks, and also our broader conversations about what does Atlanta want to be when we grow up, right? What type of built environment do we want to have for our communities? And will we create a built environment? Will we create parks and other key amenities, again, that are sensitive to the histories of inequity in our city, but also optimistic about the valuable people that we have in it, regardless of whether they live in Bankhead or Buckhead. And so that is the concept and idea around the beloved community, because we believe that not only parks can play a key role in realizing the beloved community in our city, but even more important, that equity, just and fair inclusion is actually the gateway to the beloved community. And by realizing equity, we have a chance to move towards the beloved community, a community that King so eloquently talked about.
And the timing of that is really perfect, and I'm not going to go through a presentation of the Atlanta city design, but I hope that if you haven't had a chance to see a presentation or to go to the Atlanta City Studio and see it for yourselves, check it out online. The books are just now being shipped and coming out into the real world. It's really, it's an idea about Atlanta's future, a design for Atlanta's future that allows us to design the change that's coming so that we live up to that kind of a promise. And when we started thinking about, when I was working with Commissioner Keene and Mayor Reed on that project starting in winter 2016, it just came out last September, looking ahead at the change that's really palpable that you can see coming to the city, where the region's going to grow by 2.5 million people over the next 20 years. That's like moving metropolitan Charlotte to Atlanta in 20 years. The implications from that are both exciting and scary, and we have to manage that. And in the face of that change, design it so that it happens in our best interest, so it builds the city that we want, and we end up with an Atlanta that we love. Not some other place that we don't recognize anymore. So when we started to think about designing that change and thinking about what we wanted that to look like, Atlanta's a different kind of a place. You think about a city like San Francisco or New York or even New Orleans or Chicago, very clear kind of civic identity. Atlanta's just a different kind of a place. We haven't thought too much about who we are as a place, so we wanted to do that. But to think about where we're going, we had to think about where we came from, who we are. And the core, the idea that we kept coming back to was this idea of the beloved community that Dr. King talked about, what he called the aftermath. I love the word aftermath. The aftermath of the movement, the aftermath of the civil rights movement was the beloved community. It wasn't some utopian kind of idea or unattainable place. It was a real place. And so we wanted to aim for that. Whether we reach it or not, of course, is up to us. But we wanted to aim for that. So there's a lot in that, but it basically organizes the things that we do, all the action, all the planning, all the policies and investments that we make as a city to manage change, whether it's about housing or transit or green space and parks, organize those things to accomplish 5 core values. The first one is equity, which is that city that's built for everybody. And then the progress is the hard work of achieving that equity. And ambition is our motivation for doing that hard work, and access is the infrastructure to support those opportunities. And nature is the foundation of all of that, this special place in the world. And that makes it here. I know there was some conversation about the urban ecology framework and other things that are really exciting to sort of define that. And so it's between that two span, equity on one side and nature and green space and ecology on the other, sort of frames the future for the city. And I think makes a really special, compelling case for not only who we are, but who we might be when we grow up. Where we're going.
That's right, and before we move forward, we also have to be willing and courageous enough to look backwards.
Right. And to be honest about who we are and what we had, because obviously not all of our past is happy and rosy. We've done some terrible things. We've have the remnants of a lot of our physical built history is a reflection of really bad decisions that we made. as an urban planner, I know many of you probably also get asked, why is the downtown connector such a mess? Why is it in this big curve? The answer is racism. And not everybody wants to hear that, but it's true. So when you look at also a lot of parks and green space, public spaces around the city, they're built with a lens of inequity, and they're built with a lens of bad things.
Yeah. No.
And so part of looking ahead, if we want to solve those problems, if we want to do better in our new decisions, but also make right the situation that we have and build an equitable city, then we have to acknowledge those things and be honest about ourselves and start from there.
That's right. And, you know, Atlanta, and Ryan talked a great deal about how Atlanta is a very different place. And one of the areas that Atlanta is different is that we don't like to look backwards. You know, we don't like to acknowledge some of the mistakes that we've made. And that, in my opinion, is what will minimize our ability to become the city that we can be. Our willingness to look backwards and fully understand that when Ryan and I are talking about a great city, we're not talking about an equal city. We're talking about an equitable city. And the greatest difference between equity and equality is history. We have to be willing to understand how policy decisions have influenced where we live, who we live next to, and who has opportunity to what. I always say, and Ryan has heard me say this before, that when many of the suburban counties decided not to allow MARTA in the early 70s, it wasn't because of the color of the buses. Right? It was because of the color of the people who rode the buses. But now, we don't sit in black traffic or white traffic, or Asian traffic or Latino traffic. We all sit in traffic. And so the remnants of structural racism not only hurts communities of color, but it hurts all of us. And so we have to be willing to own that. We have to be willing to own the policies that have perpetuated that. Even more important, the values that undergird an equitable city, an equitable region, and the opportunities that we have to move forward.
So the vision for the future is this equitable city. And if Atlanta is uniquely situated to deliver that kind of outcome, then conversations like these are a critical part of our steps toward getting there, because we can have the vision, but we got to bring everybody along with us. We have to learn the language. We have to learn how to talk about it. We have to be willing to talk about it, courageous and vulnerable. So Nathaniel obviously is a very significant and powerful kind of voice in this regard, and has a lot of ideas about. He has three ingredients for that kind of change.
Yeah. So when we were having an opportunity to talk about what are the pillars of realizing the beloved community, in particular parks and other key aspects of realizing the beloved community in Atlanta, you know, Ryan and I talked about three key pillars: trust, empathy, and courage. Those are three key pillars that we have to leverage together in order to realize the beloved community in Atlanta, and even more important for this conversation about parks that are a part of realizing the beloved community. Trust is key. It is central. Change moves at the speed of trust. The more we're able to create safe spaces where individuals will have a chance to trust each other, we will then have an opportunity for people to be willing to walk together towards a more inclusive city. Ryan and I are friends, and we laugh because I don't even remember the first time we met. I have no idea. But we connected around the BeltLine. And just like the BeltLine and other large-scale development projects that we have in the city, developments can be used and leveraged to bring people together and not to break people or tear people apart. And it was the vision and the possibilities that were embedded in the BeltLine that encouraged us to think about ways that we can work together. And so trust is a key component of making sure that we can move forward. We all know how awesome Ryan is, and we all know what his vision has done for this city. It's given us an opportunity to be a better city. And we need to take full advantage of that and work to ensure that Atlanta is a more connected city, a more equitable city, and a more inclusive city because of the BeltLine.
But a critical part of that, the vision is one thing, and the work, the actual physical project and all that is one thing, but implementing it for who it's for and how, and if it's for us, and if it's for the people who made it possible and for the community who made it possible, then that means that it's not just some bullet points on a PowerPoint slide, but it's actually continual work that we all have to continue to do. And the BeltLine has certainly had good days and bad days in that story, and we're a long way from actually finishing. So the challenge is to make sure that we're building that trust so that we can work together. We trust each other enough, even when we disagree about decisions that have to get made along the way. And we trust each other is going to be there, standing with us side by side as we move the project forward. And I'm not necessarily talking about, Nathaniel and I now. Of course, we're only part of a much larger story. More broadly, all of us in their different capacities have to be willing to engage with each other and trust each other and stand with each other when it's time. The next part of that is empathy, and I think that empathy is really important. For me, many of you probably heard my story. The BeltLine, was my graduate thesis, but that was, the easy part. And it's the years and years of movement, of building a movement around us that was the thing that made it possible. The people of Atlanta believed in the BeltLine before anybody else. That's why we're doing it. That's why they empowered and obligated their elected officials to make this thing come to life. And that movement, which we created early on and starting in the summer of 2001 through the summer of 2005, say, and it continues to some extent, but the core of that movement, the thing that lifted it off the ground, was a truly diverse movement of people of all stripes coming from all the communities around there. Half of us which never imagined that we would actually build it, but that if we did build it, we would build it in that inclusive kind of, highest vision that we want. And so empathy is a big part of that, because you have to understand that when we were doing that work, there were people who were vulnerable to the changes that it would bring, and we knew it at that time, and they knew it too. But the answer to gentrification and displacement is not to not build transit stations and grocery stores and greenways and trails and parks. The answer is not to hold communities down just to keep them affordable. It's to follow through on the policies that support them from rising taxes and rents in the face of all that change. And so we embedded that as part of our vision. That's why 15% of the tag goes to affordable housing and all that. Now we have to stay vigilant and make sure it's used right. We have to add new tools and continue to work hard to deliver that vision. But it's important to me that was the kind of vision that we built that was fully inclusive. And so we have to continue to step